Welcome to the PHIPA Breach Stats webinar, everyone. Thank you for registering and joining us today. I hope everyone is well, staying safe, and I can hear a few people are checking in already. If you're here, that means you've survived the blizzard of 2022, so that's a good thing. Thanks again for registering and joining us today. My name is Victoria Sklavos. I'm an info officer, an information officer at the IPC. I may have communicated with some of you over the years, or many of you over the years. Some names look familiar to me, actually, either by email or by phone. So I'm very pleased to be with you today. And we're all very pleased here at the IPC to host this webinar. It's our first webinar. It's our first in a series of information webinars. We're hosting over the next 4 weeks, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So again, welcome to the first informational webinar that we're having this year, on this one here being on PHIPA Breach Stats webinar. These are the areas that we're going to be covering during this webinar. We'll start off with PHIPA Breach Statistics reporting requirements. We'll touch on some administrative aspects of the statistical website, from login information and how to register new accounts. We will focus on the statistics questionnaire, a section-by-section overview of the questionnaire and the survey itself. We will then, recap with some tips and takeaways, look at any IPC Statistics resources that can help you with your submission, and, of course, some contact information if you ever have to reach out to us about any statistics-related questions or concerns. So these are the areas that we're going to be covering. I wanted to begin, though, with this quote from Commissioner Costine. It's taken from last year's annual report, and it holds true today and every day. With the ongoing pandemic and the challenges it's created for everyone, we wanted to thank you all, because we know how challenging it's been, the extra layer of difficulties, and yet your commitment and your professionalism in championing access and privacy, especially in these times of uncertainty. So as the Commissioner mentions in this quote, we're committed to working with you, our stakeholders, and now and in the future, and whatever that new normal may bring. So again, I wanted to take this opportunity on behalf of the IPC just to thank everyone for your professionalism and your commitment to access and privacy even throughout this ongoing pandemic. On that note, let's turn to PHIPA Breach Statistics reporting requirements. So we're going to touch on the mandatory requirements that we're looking at here. And I'm just going to adjust something here. There we go. So all health information custodians, the primary breach, it all begins here. So all health information custodians who have experienced a breach during the year must submit a report of health information privacy breaches. And this is set out under the PHIPA regulations. So there's a mandatory requirement, and that includes all health information custodians, whether you're in the public sector, or PHIPA or an MPHIPA institution as well, or in private practice. So what does the law actually say? So it actually stipulates that on or before March 1st, health information custodians must provide a report to the IPC. And it sets out, in this report, it's going to set out a number of times in the previous calendar year that personal health information in their custody or control was either stolen. So here are the 5 breach categories. This is very important because these are the 5 breach categories that the statistical report focuses on. So the breach categories are stolen personal health information, anything that was lost, so lost personal health information, used without authority, disclosed without authority, and collected by the custodian by means of the electronic health record without authority. So as we'll delve into later on in this presentation, in the actual section-by-section analysis or overview, we'll focus on each of these breach categories. Another requirement, this is a fairly new one, it applies to coroners in the context where Ontario Health manages and administers the provincial electronic health record. So if the Ontario Health provides the coroner with personal health information that is accessible by means of the electronic health record, coroners must also comply with this reporting requirement as if they were health information custodians. So for statistical reporting purposes, coroners will be treated as health information custodians. So this is a fairly new requirement, and we will see there's also a customized section in the tailored to coroners, a question that is addressed to them and them only. But we'll look at that later on. Moving forward, I may have alluded to this just a moment ago, that health information custodians, some of them are in the public sector, so they may also be a PHIPA or MPHIPA institution, so they fall under the public access and privacy laws. Good examples of that of these types of custodians would be hospitals, local health integration networks, local boards of health. There are more examples, but these are very common examples. So what this requirement says is that if you're a health information custodian in the public sector, you must submit a privacy breach statistics even if you had 0 in the reporting year. And keep in mind, I think this might be a good opportunity just to reinforce what we mean by reporting or calendar year. So a calendar year for statistical reporting purposes is January 1st through December 31st, okay? And if you're a PHIPA or an MPHIPA institution along with a custodian, you have to submit even if you have 0, let alone 1 or more, okay? Whereas, if you are a health information custodian in private practice, so you're in private practice, let's say you have your own family, you're a family doctor and you have your own doctor's office, let's say, you do not need to submit a report if you had 0. You only need to submit a report if you've had 1 or more breaches, okay? So therein lies an important distinction between the types of custodians and what is required of them. Another very important reporting requirement is for statistical reporting purposes, health information custodians must include all health information privacy breaches in the statistical report that they've experienced during the course of the calendar year, even if they were not required to report them to the IPC at the time they occurred. So there's 2 main requirements here. During the course of the year, there are certain conditions wherein you are required to notify our office in real time at the first reasonable opportunity when a breach occurs. So that's a notification requirement. But on an annual basis, there is a reporting requirement. And the reporting requirement is all-encompassing. So even if you did not have to report to us during the course of the year because the breach didn't meet one of or more of the conditions or circumstances where you must report or notify our office, at the end of the year, you have to include all breaches that you've experienced, period, if you will. So that's another important distinction that we're trying to raise awareness. And with that, I'm going to move to the next section. So the next few slides will just very briefly look at some administrative aspects of the statistical report. When you go onto our website, the statistics website, statistics.ipc.on.ca. This is the landing page. This here is our home page, and many of you are probably familiar with this. If you have your login details, great. You put in your login ID, your password, and off you go. You're set. You can start submitting your report. In circumstances where you've forgotten either your password or login ID, and these things happen, because this is done only on an annual basis, it's good to maybe save it in a safe place for future reference. But, sometimes there are new people who come on board and, new successors and predecessors have gone, and sometimes the passwords and the login IDs get lost in transition, if you will. So there is a way to retrieve it, so not all hope is not lost, if you will. Basically, what we're doing here is that you can click on, if I want to draw your attention to the bottom left-hand corner, you can, if you've ever forgotten your password or login ID, you can click on the first link where it says, please click here. And that's going to take you here to login ID and password recovery. Now, keep in mind, another tip to share with you, your institution number is always your login ID, or your login ID is always your institution number. That never changes. So that might be something to keep in mind. Primary email. So what we need here in order to retrieve either or, whether it's login ID or password, you would need to input the primary email address that's on file. And that usually belongs to the primary contact who is responsible for submitting the report. So as long as the primary email address is correct, up to date, and hasn't changed, you type in your primary email address, you click recovery. The login ID is optional, mind you. You click recovery, and you should receive, you being whoever the primary contact or email address assigned to the file. They should receive an automatic email in which they have instructions on how to reset the password and I believe also the institution number. Okay. Setting up a new account. So if you've ever, if this is your first time submitting a report, your custodian, your health information custodian, you've never reported to us on an annual basis, you will need to register an account. And so again, back on our home page, the bottom link there where it says, I've highlighted it in red there in text, setting up a new account. So you click on please register here. And this is going to take you to a registration page, which will ask for the information that we see right now. For first-time users, you can set up a new account with this information that we see here. The name of your organization, the name of the email address of the head, and more importantly, or as importantly, the name, mailing address, and email address, telephone number of the primary person responsible for completing the report. So they're known as the primary contact. It's their email address that can be used to recover or retrieve or reset passwords. This is just a snapshot of the registration page, and I wanted to really draw your attention to this section of the registration page. The registration page is going to ask the new user or the first-time user to assign a report to their profile. So I would urge you to, if you have any questions, by all means, call us if you're not sure. But just a tip here, if you're a custodian, a health information custodian in private practice, the only statistical report you need to assign to your profile is this one here, the personal health information reported breaches, okay? Because remember, custodians in private practice only have to submit a breach report, and then only if they've only had one or more breaches, right? If you are a custodian, though, in public practice, in other words, like something like a hospital, a LIN, a local board of health, I keep using those examples, then you would have to sign any other report that applies to you. So whether it's the PHIPA or PHIPA report, you would also have to assign the Personal Health Information Access and Correction Report. By the way, that webinar happens next week, and we'll talk about that later. The fifth report here at the bottom here, where my cursor is, that's the CYFSA report, the Access, Correction, Personal Health Information, and Privacy Breaches. It includes all three elements, access, correction, and privacy breaches. Now, we sometimes get questions from service providers who meet the definition of service providers under Part 10 of the CYFSA about whether or not they have to submit a PHIPA report. And sometimes these service providers are also health information custodians under PHIPA. So the answer to that is if they've experienced a breach that relates to personal health information as defined under Section 4 of the Personal Health Information Protection Act, then yes, they would have to submit a PHIPA breach report. If not, then they would just have to submit the CYFSA access correction and privacy breach. Okay. So I just wanted to draw your attention to those administrative aspects there. So now we're going to enter a series of slides that will focus on the questionnaire itself. Okay. And off we go. So section 1 is pretty straightforward, but it's very important nonetheless. It really is your profile. You're updating if there have been any personnel changes that you haven't informed us about during the course of the year. This is the section where you need to ensure that all the contact information, names, email addresses, phone numbers, or what have you, they're up to date. So if we ever need to contact the institution, or in this case, the health information custodian, we have the right information on file, okay? So this is the section that I mentioned earlier during the mandatory breach requirements, reporting requirements, that fairly new reporting requirement that deals with coroners. So this is the, if you're not a coroner, you simply click no, you proceed on to the next section. If you are, then you click on yes, and it will skip the next section being the type of health information custodians, because keep in mind, coroners are not health information custodians, but for statistical reporting purposes, they're treated as if they were, right? But they would skip this section. This section, though, is for all other all health information custodians. If you look at this section closely, you have to check off the box that relates to the type of custodian you are. And if you look at it, it really mirrors to a very large extent Section 3 of the Personal Health Information Protection Act, which defines or identifies who is a health information custodian. So in this case, I've just arbitrarily given, for the purposes of this presentation, I just checked off the Ontario Agency for Health Protection and Promotion as an example. But you please check off the box that best fits your organization and the type of health information custodian you are. Okay. This section here, 1.4, this is really, I like to call it like a fork in the road, if you will, because depending on how you answer this question, it will really influence how the rest of your submission, right? So it's very important that you click the appropriate box. If you have not experienced any breaches, you click on the first box, and reporting will be very easy. It will take literally seconds. So if you have had 0 breaches, checking off the first box will literally take you to the end of the questionnaire. You can submit it, and your work is done. If you've had 1 or more, then you click on the second box, and it will take you to Section 2, okay? So Section 2 is a very important section. All sections are very important, but I like to say that Section 2, all roads lead to Section 2, if you will, because it's the consolidated overarching total of health information breaches across the 5 breach categories. And we're going to come up with that. So like I said, so when added together, all breach categories must add up to this total in 2.1. And you can see that in the red text here, how the boxes in each of the forthcoming breach categories have to equal 15, okay? So for the purposes of this presentation, I've just put 15 as the total. Now, if there's an imbalance, this section between this section and the breach category sections that are coming up, the system will flag this by way of a prompt or an error message and will not allow you to proceed or submit the report until the imbalance is corrected. So needless to say, it's a very critical section of your report, and if it's completed accurately, then you will be able to submit your report without any error messages. So now let's turn to each breach category. The first one up is stolen personal health information, okay? again, for the purposes of this presentation, I just put the number 5 there. So total of the 15, 5 of which were breaches due to stolen personal health information. So as you can see, the first thing that you're asked, like I said, is put in the total. And then you're going to be asked to provide a further breakdown of this subtotal, right? This total of 5 stolen personal health information breaches. So the breakdown is as follows, as you'll see. Under this breach category, you're going to be asked, of the 5, who committed the breach? How many were attributed to internal staff, and how many were attributed to external parties? And this has to add up to 5 in this case, right? So in this case, we have 3 breaches that were due to theft by an internal employee or an agent, and 2 that were attributed by theft by a stranger. Okay, so then you'll be asked under this section. You'll notice that the other breakdown is what was the cause. So here we're looking at the breakdown along the lines of what caused the breach. So of the 5 breaches in this category, how many are the result of ransomware or cyber attack or an unencrypted USB key? And again, the breakdown has to add up to 5 in this case, okay? And finally, on this slide, the final breakdown under this particular breach category is we see that it's along the lines of how many people were affected per breach under this category. So 1 breach affected 1 individual, 4 breaches actually affected 11 to 50 individuals, right? And again, it all adds up to 5. The reason why we're going through this line by line, for the most part in each section, is because we often get questions about imbalances and resulting error messages, as I mentioned earlier. So hopefully that helps to clarify how to report the breakdown of each breach category, and ensure that everything adds up. Okay. The next breach category is lost personal health information. Much like the previous breach category, once again, you're asked to input the total number of breaches related to lost PHI, personal health information, and again, provide a breakdown. In this case, I put 5 breaches related to lost health information. Now, we won't go into detail about the breakdown of this section because it's more or less the same as the previous section. But as you can see, the breakdown, again, this time around, it's along the lines of total breaches due to the loss of PHI. I mean, how many were the result of a ransomware attack, and how many were the result of a cyberware attack or whatever, cyber attack. And again, the breakdown here for the purposes is here 4 due to the ransomware. And again, it all adds up to 5. And 1, as it relates to loss, was a result of something else that might have been lost. This may be a good opportunity. And again, as you can see here, there's another breakdown in terms of how many people were affected per breach. And as I was just about to say, it may be a good opportunity to share a helpful tip here. Let's say you discovered in 2021 that personal health information in your custody or control, something that you hold in your possession, okay, was actually lost in 2018. Please count that breach in the year it was discovered. So in other words, 2021. So the tip is, to reiterate, in complete report, count a privacy breach in the year it was discovered, even if the breach occurred in a previous calendar year. And this line of logic, or this tip, applies to all breach categories. I just happen to be giving it right now for this particular breach category. But if any of the breach categories you've discovered something in one year, but that in fact it occurred in the previous year, count it in the year that it was discovered. And again, I bring this up because it is a common question that we get in our statistics emails there. Okay, third breach category, used without authority. Again, we see here I've put 3 breaches under the category, and once again, it's asking for a breakdown of the 3 breaches. Firstly, the means through which PHI was used without authority, and you'll see in the next slide how many were affected by per breach under this category. I want to draw your attention before we move to the next slide to the text box here. we often get questions from members, from our stakeholders, so custodians, health information custodians, on what would constitute a use. And as you can see here, when you're looking at this breach category, think of what was viewed. If something was viewed or handled improperly without authority, then you can include it in this breach category, used without authority. So it's either viewed or handled, okay? So that's something that I think that might help a few people understand exactly what it means when we say use without authority or used without authority. And again, as I mentioned earlier, another breakdown. You'll see this in every breach category. It's asking you the breakdown as it relates to how many people were affected per breach. The next slide here is the next breach category. So we're now on breach category number 4, so 4 or 5, disclosure without authority. By now, like I said, you've probably noticed a pattern in terms of the similar questions that are asked under each breach category in terms of the total amount and the respective breakdowns. You may have also noticed that under each breach category and the breakdown, there is a recurring instruction to count each incident only once. And I've highlighted that in red in the red text box there. So you probably noticed that's in each category and in each breakdown, you'll see this. And so what does this mean? What we're trying to say is that count each incident, but only once. Please don't double count. And I'm going to elaborate on this very important point because, again, it's a common question that we get. So I'm going to give you an example. So let's say one incident includes more than one of the 5 categories. What the tip is, choose the category that it best fits, okay? For example, if an employee, this is a good example, if an employee or a staff member accessed personal health information without authority, so that's one breach category, but then turned around and disclosed that information, that's another breach category, disclosed without authority. We are urging you to count that incident as either a use or a disclosure, but not both. So this is why it's repeated and it's a recurring instruction to count each incident once. We want you to count each incident, but only once. And hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Now we're going to be, and again, this is another breakdown. As you'll see, it's the affected parties and how many people were affected by the breach. The 5th and final breach category is collected without authority by means of the EHR, okay? And in this case, what I want to draw your attention to is how does PHIPA define collect, okay? PHIPA defines the term collect as the gathering, acquiring, receiving, or obtaining of personal health information by any means from any source. For statistical reporting purposes, though, this section specifically captures the number of breaches related to unauthorized collection by means of the electronic health record. And in this case, I just put, 1 as a total, and that 51 to 100 individuals were affected by this particular breach. Okay. And so this is just a table of the sample example that we went through. So there was a total of 15 breaches, and each breach category must add up to that, right? So 5, 5, 3, 1, and 1, total of 15. And as you know, the totals for each breach category is further broken down as we've discussed. But as long as the numbers add up to 2.1, and as long as the numbers add up within each breach category, you should be good to go. You should not receive an error message. Everything should be in balance, and you won't receive any prompts or error messages like I mentioned. Okay. So if everything adds up, then you will be taken to the very end of the statistical report. And as you can see, if you've reached it this far, that's great. So a few things that I want to draw your attention here. You have to click the key, submit the key button here, submit questionnaire. In order to confirm and complete this whole process, if you don't hit this key button, it won't be complete. It won't be submitted, if you will. And so please ensure to click submit. My tip is also to log off, and you'll see in this slide here, in the upper right-hand corner. Once you click submit, you're going to get this messaging here that your questionnaire is being successfully submitted. Thanks again for your cooperation. You should also receive an automatic email, at least the primary contact should, that confirms or reconfirms that you've submitted. And then I suggest that you log off, like in the upper right-hand corner, log off, even exit the browser. I think that may also just make sure that you've completely logged off, okay? But if we go back one slide, I want to mention here that there's also this opportunity where if you want a report for your own records, you can click on that View a Printer-Friendly version right over here. And what that will do is it will allow you to print it, and it would also give you an opportunity to save it as a PDF for your own records, okay? But I also want to mention this. You don't have to complete the report in one sitting. So let's say you were going through any of the sections that we went through and you stopped at, I don't know, breach category that related to lost personal health information. You can save your information, log off, and when you log on again at a future date, as long as it's before the deadline, the system will take you to the very last section where you left off, okay? So I don't want you to feel pressured to fill it out unless you can. You don't have to fill it out in one sitting, okay? And let's say you get to this point where you do submit and you get this thanks again for your cooperation messaging. And at a later date before the deadline, you realize, you know what, I actually have to go back and I have to correct something, amend something. I submitted something that, you know, maybe you submitted zero breaches and you come across that you have at least one. You can always go back in and amend the report. So up until the deadline. So again, so once you click submit, now keep in mind, if you do go back in, whether you are going back in to complete the report or whether you're going back in to correct the report, you have to, please keep in mind, you have to reconfirm your completed questionnaire. So you have to click submit it again in order for the correction to be applied, okay? So that's very important. And like I said, you can also get a copy of it for your own records by way of that viewer printer-friendly version. And as I mentioned, the deadline to submit the 2021 PHIPA breach statistics is Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. And again, that's stipulated under the law. And so we still have time. We're still, January 20th today. And some of you have already submitted, and we do thank you for that. We're very pleased with the number of reports that have already been submitted. And so we're looking forward to, once the statistic website closes, then we start crunching the numbers. And that's when we step in and look at the numbers to see if there are any variances. We may call institutions in case there's something that's caught our eye, maybe year to year, if there's a variance, or and just to get clarification or what have you. So moving on to the next, so some tips and takeaways, just to summarize what we've shared so far in this presentation. So again, please report all breaches, whether or not you were required to notify the IPC at the time they occurred. Okay. Count a privacy breach in the year it was discovered, even though it may have occurred in a previous calendar year. Because we can't retroactively, the reason why this happens, one of the reasons is we can't retroactively go back in history and update an already completed submission. So if you've discovered it in one year, even though it occurred in a previous year, you're good to go with respect to counting it in the year you discovered it. Again, count each incident but not more than once, right? So count each incident once. So if one incident includes more than one of the 5 breach categories, choose the one that best fits, okay? Another tip, you may already be doing this, but it's no harm to reiterate this, is just keep track of breach statistics over the course of the calendar year. It's going to really help you this time of the year when it comes time to submit your statistics, okay? Administrative-wise, a few tips. Your login ID is always your institution number, and only the primary email address will receive an automatic email when resetting a password. So again, it's key to ensure that the primary email address that we have on file is correct and up to date. Otherwise, the email will go to that older primary email address. So it's very important that we have and that you include the correct email address. So whenever it comes to resetting your password or your login ID, the automatic email will go to the appropriate person. Okay, moving on. Okay, so IPC Statistics Resources. I just wanted to lay out 3 that I think are relevant to your statistics and your submissions there. The first one up, again, you may very well be familiar with all this. And anyways, the first one is annual reporting of privacy breach statistics to the Commissioner. This is literally, if you look at this particular guidance document, and by the way, they're all available on our website under the guidance section, okay? And also under the guidance for organizations as well. You'll find these links there. But in any event, this first guidance document really is expanding on what we went through on the section-by-section overview earlier on in the presentation. And it walks you through each section according to the breakdowns, et cetera. And so it's a helpful resource to have and to be familiar with. The second one in the middle, that's the workbook and completion guide. And I have a tip about this too. In fact, this is a tip that I've received from stakeholders who are submitting their reports. They find, a few of them have informed me of this, that they find that it's easy for them to submit the report while they, to have the workbook there while they're also online. And so as they're submitting the report or working on the, in the workbook, they're also inputting the information in the, on the website. So if there's any imbalance, they get the prompt earlier rather than waiting to submit the online statistics after they've completed the workbook. So it's good to have both open at the same time. That way you can click, input the information, save as you go, and if there are any prompts, you know about it earlier. Any error messages, let's say, that something doesn't add up or if there's an imbalance. And this third document here is reporting a privacy breach to the IPC. These are the 7 conditions in which health information custodians must notify our office during the course of the year. There are stats, though, that are above and beyond these 7 conditions. And so, like I said earlier, just to clarify, for statistical reporting purposes, you're submitting all statistics, even if you didn't have to notify us during the calendar year. If you're ever interested to find out, okay, on what grounds do I need to notify the IPC during the course of the year in real time at the first reasonable opportunity, this document here will give you those 7 conditions. On an annual basis, you have to submit all. Again, I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record here, but I can't emphasize it enough. So it's an all-encompassing submission. Just think about anything that you've notified our office plus anything that you didn't have to notify our office, and that will give you what you have to submit on an annual basis for statistical reporting purposes. Okay? Now, this particular one, just to give a heads up, the types of custodians that this statistical report applies to, remember, these are custodians like hospitals, LHINs, local boards of health, not just them, but just to give you an idea. So health information custodians who are also PHIPA or MPHIPA institutions, this is a requirement. If a custodian is in private practice, you don't have to submit this report. So you don't have to worry about this report, at least for now, unless the law is amended sometime in the future. But for the time being, PHIPA access and correction statistics, it's only for custodians who are also MPHIPA or PHIPA institutions. Then how to contact us. Now, by all means, like the commissioner said earlier in that quote from last year's annual report, like I said, it stands true today and every day. Please don't hesitate to contact us. We're here to work with you, listen to you. You can contact us. The general inquiry line here is info@ipc.on.ca. The statistics, we have a specific one for statistics@ipc.on.ca. If you call us, simply ask to speak with an information officer. I'm one of 3, and we're all very eager to help you and ready to help you, of course, as well. With that, I think that's the end of the presentation. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. If you have any questions, like I said, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you for submitting your reports, and all the best to you.